Quiet! Please, quiet! Today we came together to judge Mr. Boone, who is accused of killing Wellington, or to declare him innocent. Last Friday night, May 22nd, Mrs. Shear's dog was found dead in her garden by Christopher Boone. The dog Wellington is a black poodle. He was stabbed with a green garden fork and died because of his injuries. After further investigation, Mr. Boone is the prime suspect and the accused. The trial is opened.
Your Honor and ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Mr. Boone is clearly guilty of Wellington's murder. He has already admitted it himself. However, this was not self-defense, as the accused describes it, but a cold-blooded act. Mr. Boone already had arguments with Mrs. Shears and was only trying to take revenge.
Objection!
Allowed.
My client and I do not dispute the fact that he is responsible for Wellington's death. However, this is not murder, but pure self-defense that tragically led to Wellington's death. As the investigation showed, the dog had rabies and was therefore aggressive. He wanted to attack my man dad and has done so. What else should he have done?
I'm very sorry. Wellington had to die because of me, but it was only self-defense. I was scared and panicked, which is why I quickly grabbed the garden fork to stop him. I'm so sorry.
If you're so sorry, Mr. Boone, why didn't you call for help? Why have you kept the truth secret for so long?
I didn't know what to do. I panicked and ran away. I'm so sorry.
Strangely, you had enough time to get the garden fork out of the tool shed. Apparently, the dog's attack wasn't as quick and surprising as you told us. On top of that, we are only talking about the poodle and not the fighting dog. You're a strong, grown-up man. Couldn't you have defended yourself differently? And why were you in Mrs. Shear's garden at all?
I don't know. Everything happens quickly. The garden fork was already in the garden. It was there, you know. Please.
No further questions.
Would you like to add something, Mr. Boone? No. Now the witnesses present can describe the situation from their point of view. The prosecution may call its first witness.
I call Christopher Boone, the son of Mr. Boone, who has found the dog dead in the garden and who was first accused of murder. Christopher, do you promise that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. I always say the truth. I cannot lie.
Okay, good. Thanks, Christopher. So, tell me how you found Wellington and how your father admitted his offense.
It was 7 minutes after midnight. The dog was lying on the grass in the middle of the lawn in front of Mrs. Shear's house. There was a garden fork sticking out of the dog. The points of the fork have gone all the way through the dog and into the ground because the fork had not fallen over. The body was still warm. I pulled the fork out of Wellington and hugged him. Mrs. Shears ran into the garden and saw me. She thought that I killed the dog, but I'm not guilty. She called the police and I got arrested, but father got me out of this. I tried to solve the case on my own and asked some neighbors if they saw something. One day we had a fight because I found out that my mother was alive and that my father lied to me. After that, he tried to calm me down and wanted to tell me another truth. He stared at the wall and told me that he killed Wellington. I wondered if this was a joke, but father knows that I don't understand jokes. He tried to explain the situation and I realized that he wasn't joking. I got angry, pushed him away and screamed at him. Later on, I was terrified and ran away to find my mother.
And how did he explain his actions?
He said that Mrs. Shears was very good to us and to him. He thought that she could move in with us. They argued about this. He thought that Mrs. Shears cared more about her dog than for him. She kicked him out of her house, and Wellington seemed to be aggressive and attacked father. Furthermore, he said that he just could have kicked the dog to stop him, but he lost control. And that's it.
Well, thank you, Christopher. You can now take a seat again. Next, I ask Mrs. Shears to describe her view. Please tell us about your relationship with Mr. Boone, and tell us whether Mr. Boone is able for such an act, or whether it was really just self-defense.
I was there for Mr. Boone. When Mrs. Boone left him with my husband, we both felt the same pain and understood each other well. I spent a lot of time with him and Christopher. He wanted me to move in with him, but I wasn't ready for a solid new relationship, which is why we were arguing. But he killed my beloved Wellington. He always had something against him. Before that, he always freaked out pretty quickly when we had an argument. So I could trust him to be able for this terrible act. Self-defense? Never. My baby would never hurt a fly.
Thank you, Mrs. Shears. Next, I ask Mr. Wise to describe his view.
I was awake on the night of May 22nd because I had to take care of my mother. I heard an argument outside and later heard a howl. That person was probably Mr. Boone. The police came later and arrested Christopher. I didn't notice anything else.
Thank you, Mr. Wise. Next, I ask Mrs. Alexander to describe her view.
I am very shocked by Wellington's death. I can't believe it. I have a dog myself, and the two got on well. Unfortunately, I didn't hear what happened at night. And I didn't hear anything either because I'm a little thief. I couldn't help Christopher with his investigation either. I'm sorry.
That's all right, Mrs. Alexander. Thank you. Next, I ask the policeman to describe his view.
I found Christopher next to the stepdog. He hugged Wellington and didn't let go. He also didn't answer my questions and started beating me, so I arrested him. We found a knife in his pocket. Well, he didn't kill the dog with the knife, but why does he have one? Whatever. His father, Mr. Boone, got him out of his cell later that night. Mr. Boone is a nice guy. I really like him. He could never do anything like this. I think that he just takes the blame to protect his son.
Okay. But any evidence suggests that Mr. Boone killed the dog. Besides, it is almost impossible for Christopher Boone to lie. Well, please take a seat again. Next, I ask some other neighbors to describe their view. Mr. Stiles.
I don't really know anymore. I can't remember seeing something. I don't really know. I don't really know anymore. It looked like a nightmarish devil. Was attacking a black werewolf with a huge fork. Oh my gosh! And everything spun. Whoa.
Okay. Unfortunately, this statement cannot be used. Please leave the courtroom, Mr. Stiles. Please excuse this special witness. Next, I ask the lady from house number 44, Mrs. Stevens.
I have to be honest. Wellington's death is tragic, of course, but I personally have never liked him. He always seemed a bit aggressive, and Mrs. Shears never put him on a leash. I was always afraid that he would attack and bite my children. That's why I believe Mr. Boone was just afraid and defended himself.
Thank you, Mrs. Stevens. Next, they asked Mrs. Boone to tell us about her former husband's behavior.
We used to have a lot of fights, which is why I finally left him, among other things. During our arguments, he often got angry quickly, but rarely or hardly became violent. He could pull himself together, even if he had completely lost control. I don't think he would be able to kill Wellington, just like that.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Boone. Well, now we have got different impressions of the situation. I have nothing else to add.
Well, now the jury has the opportunity to ask questions.
Mr. Boone, why didn't you just call for help? You talked to Mrs. Shears just before. She could have heard you and helped you. Or maybe it wasn't self-defense at all?
I was just too shocked, and the fear stole my speech. Besides, I had been arguing with Mrs. Shears just before. Then I didn't want to call after her. Any further questions?
No, no further questions, Your Honor.
Well, now the prosecutors and Mr. Boone's defense may summarize their facts and opinions. Mr. Prosecutor, you can now start.
Thank you, Your Honor. As I said, Mr. Boone is, according to the facts, guilty of Wellington's murder. It was not self-defense. Mr. Boone had several options to prevent this tragic event. He could have called for help or fought back. In addition, he didn't call for help and kept the truth a long time. The statements of some witnesses confirm my statements. I plead Mr. Boone guilty.
Now we hear what Mr. Boone's defense has to say.
Your Honor, dear jury, please listen to me carefully. Mr. Boone was only acting in self-defense. Wellington's death was not intended. He was suddenly attacked by the poodles in the dark at night. He didn't know how to behave and grabbed the garden gable in reflex and used it to fend off Wellington without thinking about possible consequences. But there was no time for that either. As some witnesses confirm, Mr. Boone cannot be put up with such a cold-blooded act. Even other neighbors report that they were afraid of the dog and preferred to keep their distance. Mr. Boone didn't intentionally kill Wellington. We plead innocent.
Alright then. I thank the prosecutor, Mr. Boone's defense, Mr. Boone, the witnesses, and everyone present who is participating in the trial today to ensure justice. The jury and I will now withdraw for 5 minutes to give a verdict on Mr. Boone. Please stay seated. The process will continue shortly. Thank you for your patience. The process is now continuing. The jury now has the right to express their opinion.
Thank you all for being here today and making your statements. The majority of the jury decided that Mr. Boone is guilty of Wellington's murder and should be punished accordingly. Thank you for your attention.
Many thanks to the jury. Based on the facts and statements available, as well as the decision of the jury, I found Mr. Boone guilty of murder of Wellington. As a verdict, Mr. Boone will have to work 45 hours of social work and pay 500 euros to the regional animal shelter. Thanks, and have a nice day. A great thing happened in London today. An animal abuser did not get away with it, but was sentenced in a fair trial. This is the way it should always be.